Cassino, May 1944. The Italian campaign grinds forward through mud and blood. Allied forces have finally broken to the Gustav Line after months of brutal fighting that reduced the hilltop monastery to rubble. German forces are retreating north toward Rome, their defensive positions collapsing under relentless assault. And in a field hospital near the destroyed monastery, medical personnel are processing hundreds of wounded soldiers from both sides. Germans who surrendered, Poles, British, Americans, all mixed together in the chaos of evacuation. Among the wounded is a German Oberstreiter, a corporal, listed in hospital records as Hans Weber, 352nd Infantry Division. Shrapnel wounds to the left leg and shoulder. Captured during the final German withdrawal from Monte Cassino. His military identification book shows standard documentation. Born 1919 in Munich, conscripted 1940. Posted to Italy 1943. Routine paperwork for a routine prisoner of war. On May 21st, 1944, Weber is transferred from the field hospital to a British POW processing center near Naples, along with 47 other German wounded. The manifest lists his name, rank, unit, and medical status. Standard procedure for captured enemy personnel requiring ongoing medical treatment. But something unusual happens during processing. A British intelligence officer interviews Weber privately, separate from the standard POW interrogation that all captured enemy personnel undergo. No transcript of this interview exists in accessible records. What does exist is a brief notation in the processing log. Weber Hans, transferred to Special Holding per Intelligence Section authorization. The other 47 prisoners are processed normally, assigned POW numbers, transferred to established camps in North Africa, and eventually to camps in Britain and the United States. Their fates are documented, their captivity recorded, their eventual repatriation tracked through standard channels maintained by the Red Cross. Hans Weber's name disappears from POW rosters entirely. On June 3, 1944, a coded message from British intelligence in Naples to London mentions German personnel of intelligence interests currently in protective custody, pending determination of operational value. No names given, just a reference number that doesn't correspond to standard POW documentation systems. On June 18th, an American OSS memo discusses cooperation with British services regarding German prisoners with specialized knowledge, assessment ongoing, value determination pending. And then silence. In the massive accounting after the war, thousands of German POWs captured in Italy were documented, processed, and eventually repatriated. Their names appear in rosters. Their captivity is recorded in Red Cross files. Their return to Germany is tracked through Occupation Authority records. But Oberstreiter Hans Weber appeared on no repatriation lists, no POW camp rosters, no Red Cross records of German prisoners held by Allied forces. For someone who should have been processed through standard channels like thousands of others captured in the same battle, the absence was unusual, and it would remain unexplained for 81 years. If you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The 352nd Infantry Division was Wehrmacht, not SS, a standard German army unit, composed largely of conscripts rather than volunteers or ideological zealots. It had fought on the Eastern Front before being transferred to Italy in 1943 to reinforce German defenses against the Allied invasion. The division suffered heavy casualties at Monte Cassino during months of Allied bombardment and assault that turned the battlefield into a moonscape. Hans Weber's military record, pieced together from fragmentary Wehrmacht documents captured by Allied forces and held in various archives, shows what appears to be a typical service history for a conscript. Basic training 1940. Posted to France 1941. Transferred to Eastern Front 1942. Wounded near Stalingrad. Recovered. Transferred to Italy 1943. Standard progression through the war years. Nothing remarkable about his assignments or performance. But there are gaps in his file. A notation from March 1943 shows him listed as temporarily assigned to intelligence liaison duties for 3 months before returning to his infantry unit. No explanation what those duties entailed or why an infantry corporal would be assigned to intelligence work, even temporarily. A fitness report from his company commander in Italy, dated February 1944, described him as capable soldier, adequate performance, politically unreliable, requires supervision. The phrase politically unreliable was unusual in standard fitness reports, typically reserved for soldiers suspected of defeatist attitudes or questionable loyalty to the regime. When British forces compiled lists of German POWs captured at Monte Cassino for intelligence assessment, standard procedure to identify personnel with specialized knowledge, Weber's name appeared on preliminary roster as someone flagged for additional questioning due to his temporary assignment to intelligence liaison work. Men with intelligence exposure, even peripheral, were routinely interrogated more thoroughly about German military capabilities and organizational structures. But there was no record of such interrogation in standard POW processing files. No technical debrief. No assessment of his intelligence value. No documentation of what information he might have provided about German forces in Italy. In August 1944, the International Committee of the Red Cross, coordinating prisoner information between belligerent powers as required by the Geneva Convention, requested information from British authorities about several German POWs whose status was unclear based on incomplete documentation. Weber's name was on the list. His family in Germany had inquired about him after receiving notification through official Wehrmacht channels that he had been wounded and captured. The British response, delivered through official Red Cross channels, stated, Subject Hans Weber, captured May 1944 Monte Cassino. Status under review. Further information pending administrative processing. The Red Cross filed follow-up inquiries in December 1944 and March 1945. The responses were identical in wording. Status under review. Information pending. After Germany's surrender in May 1945, Allied authorities began the massive process of repatriating German POWs. The process took years, with millions of prisoners being processed, documented, and returned to Germany through 1948 and beyond. Records were meticulous. Names, POW numbers, camp assignments, health status, dates of repatriation, all carefully tracked. Weber's name appeared in none of these records. No repatriation date. No camp assignment. No health status update. No indication of what had happened to him after May 1944. His family's inquiries through German authorities in the late 1940s received responses stating he had been captured in Italy, but that current whereabouts were unknown, presumed to have died in captivity with notification lost in wartime administrative confusion. Such gaps were common enough. Thousands of prisoners had died in camps from disease, malnutrition, or inadequate medical care, and record-keeping had been imperfect during the war's final chaotic years. In 1952, the West German government established a service to trace missing soldiers and clarify the fates of men whose deaths had never been confirmed. Weber's family submitted his information, hoping for closure. The response, after investigation, stated that British records showed him captured in May 1944, but that no subsequent documentation could be located. Status: missing, presumed deceased. Through the 1950s and 1960s, historians researching the Italian campaign occasionally encountered Weber's name in captured German unit rosters showing the composition of forces at Monte Cassino. He appeared as one of thousands of soldiers who fought there. Nothing remarkable about his service or his capture. But researchers who tried to trace what happened to specific prisoners encountered a curious gap. Most captured soldiers had clear documentation trails through POW camps and repatriation. Weber had none. The absence was noted in a few academic footnotes, but not investigated. Thousands of records had been lost during the war, and gaps in documentation were common enough not to raise particular suspicion among historians focused on broader campaign narratives. The silence around his case was not obviously managed. It looked like the ordinary confusion of wartime record-keeping, the gaps that existed throughout military archives from that chaotic period. Just one more soldier whose fate became unclear in the administrative confusion of mass captivity and repatriation. Unless someone looked closely enough to notice that the gaps followed a pattern, that the absences appeared at specific moments in the documentation, that the silence was too complete to be merely accidental. Dr. Maria Schneider was researching German POWs captured during the Italian campaign, focusing on how Allied forces had exploited captured personnel for intelligence purposes during and after the war. a historian at the University of Munich. Schneider had spent years working through British, American, and German archives, documenting the interrogation and processing of German prisoners. In 2024, while reviewing recently declassified MI5 files from 1944, part of routine declassification cycle releasing materials after 80 years, she found a memo that caught her attention. It was an internal assessment from July 1944 discussing German prisoners of potential operational value currently in protective custody. The memo listed criteria for evaluation: evidence of anti-Nazi sentiment, willingness to cooperate with Allied intelligence, specialized knowledge, absence of war crimes involvement, suitability for potential operational employment against German forces. One entry read, Subject Mason, Hans Weber, former Wehrmacht 352nd Division. Approached British personnel during hospital processing May 1944 indicating willingness to provide information and cooperation. Claims to have been providing intelligence to Allied contacts since March 1943 while maintaining position within German military unit. Information being verified through independent sources. If confirmed, subject as potential value for operational purposes given knowledge of German forces in Italy and credibility as genuine Wehrmacht soldier. Recommend protection and assessment for possible employment in ongoing operations. Mason, a code name, and a claim that transformed everything. Weber hadn't simply been captured at Monte Cassino. He claimed to have been working with Allied intelligence for over a year before his capture, providing information while still serving with his Wehrmacht unit. Schneider requested the full Mason file through official research channels. The response came months later. Requested materials remain classified under national security exemption. Intelligence sources and methods. Access denied. She searched for cross-references in other archives. In a 1945 British intelligence budget document, partially declassified in 2018, she found a line item for German operational assets, Italy theater with a notation, Mason arrangement, specialized knowledge Wehrmacht operations, ongoing employment. In a 1947 memo discussing post-war disposition of wartime intelligence assets, there was a paragraph about former German military personnel employed during operations in Italy, continued protection arrangements pending resettlement under new identities. None named Weber explicitly, but the code name Mason, the timeline, and the theater of operations aligned perfectly. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. In 2025, Italian military archives released documents from partisan operations in 1943 to 1944, materials that had been held in restricted collections. Among them was a report from March 1943 describing contact with German soldier claiming desertion, providing information about Wehrmacht positions and troop movements near Cassino area. The report noted, subject claims political opposition to Nazi regime, expresses willingness to provide intelligence regarding German military operations. Information verified and assessed as accurate. Contact established with British liaison officer. Subject returned to German lines to maintain cover position per British instruction pending further contact. March 1943. 15 months before Weber's official capture at Monte Cassino. The report suggested he had been working as an agent in place, remaining with his unit, while providing intelligence to the Allies through partisan intermediaries. A follow-up British intelligence assessment from April 1944, discovered in the same archive release, discussed Asset Mason, embedded with German 352nd Division, continues to provide valuable tactical intelligence regarding German defensive positions, planned withdrawals, and unit morale. Information verified through independent sources. Extraction plan being developed should subject's position become compromised. When he was wounded and captured in May 1944, it wasn't a capture. It was an extraction, a planned removal from his cover position when continuing to maintain it became too dangerous or when his value as an embedded asset was outweighed by his potential value in other roles. But the most revealing document came from British archives released in 2025. An MI5 memo from May 1944 discussed the circumstances of Weber's transfer from standard POW processing. The memo read, Mason extracted during Monte Cassino operations per prior arrangement. Subject sustained injuries during fighting requiring medical evacuation. British personnel at field hospital identified subject during processing per predetermined recognition procedures established with asset. Subject transferred to secure location for debriefing and medical treatment. Recommend continued employment given operational knowledge of German forces in Italy and proven reliability over 15 months of contact. Identity protection permanent given risk of reprisal against family remaining in Germany and potential value of maintaining false capture narrative for operational security. False capture narrative. Weber's family in Germany had been told he was captured and his status was unknown. His Wehrmacht unit believed he had been captured along with other wounded during the retreat. POW records showed processing began then mysteriously stopped. All of it was theater, a constructed story to hide the fact that he had been working for British intelligence since March 1943. But crucial questions remained unanswered, protected by classification barriers that showed no sign of coming down. What had motivated his initial approach to partisan contacts in 1943? What specific intelligence had he provided during 15 months embedded with his unit? What had happened to him after his extraction in 1944? Where had he lived? When had he died? And why had the truth been classified for 81 years? Schneider filed formal requests for full declassification of the Mason file. The responses stated that materials related to Mason operation remain classified, that information regarding intelligence operations in Italy during World War II remained sensitive for reasons that could not be disclosed, that no additional release was authorized at this time. She found one final document in a 2025 release of British Home Office immigration files. A 1948 entry noted the processing of foreign national, German origin, employment verification provided by government security services, with a new identity established under witness protection protocols typically used for intelligence assets requiring permanent anonymity. The entry noted, subject resettlement complete, new identity, redacted, location, redacted, employment, redacted, family notification prohibited per security arrangement. Subject's German family to be informed subject died in British captivity 1946 to maintain operational security and protect family from potential reprisal. 2 years after the war ended, Weber's family in Munich was officially informed through Red Cross channels that he had died in British captivity, likely from complications related to his wounds. They mourned him. They held a memorial service. They moved on with their lives. And he lived somewhere in Britain under a new name, his real identity sealed, his family never knowing he had survived. The truth about Oberstfreiter Hans Weber is no longer completely hidden. It exists in fragmentary declassified documents, in partial file releases scattered across archives in 3 countries. He approached Allied contacts in March 1943 offering to provide intelligence while maintaining his position with his Wehrmacht unit. He worked as an agent in place for 15 months, providing tactical intelligence about German operations while continuing to serve as a German soldier. He was extracted under cover of being wounded and captured in May 1944. He was employed by British intelligence after his extraction. He was resettled in Britain under a new identity sometime before 1948. His family was told he died in captivity in 1946. But the full story remained sealed behind classification barriers. The documents that would answer essential questions: what motivated his decision to approach the Allies in 1943? What specific intelligence did he provide during those 15 months? What operations did his information enable? Where did he live under his new identity? What name did he use? When did he actually die? Those documents remain classified in London. In 2025, a retired MI5 officer, speaking anonymously to a journalist researching wartime intelligence operations, said something revealing. The Weber case represents a category of wartime operation we've never wanted to acknowledge publicly. He wasn't a defector who switched sides. He stayed with his unit, continued fighting alongside them, continued participating in combat operations against Allied forces while feeding us intelligence. That's different from someone who simply defected. It means he participated in operations against us while working for us. How do you explain that publicly? How do you tell his family he was alive all those years while they mourn him? How do you admit we let them grieve while he lived under protection? You don't. You classify it permanently and hope no one asks the right questions. Schneider's research revealed something beyond Weber's individual story. In the declassified documents, she found references to similar cases designated by similar code names: mason, carpenter, smith, builder, painter, each described as German military personnel, embedded operations Italy 1943 to 1944, extracted under combat cover, identity protection permanent, family notification false. Each file remained classified. Each family remained uninformed that their relative had survived. In late 2025, Schneider received an anonymous letter mailed from London with no return address. The message was brief and handwritten. You found Mason. Ask why his family was told he died when he didn't. Ask how many other German soldiers worked for the Allies while still in Wehrmacht units fighting against us. Ask how many families still don't know their relatives survived the war. The classification isn't protecting intelligence methods anymore. It's protecting a decision to let families mourn people who were alive. And we're still not ready to admit we did that. 81 years after Oberstfreiter Hans Weber was wounded at Monte Cassino and disappeared into British intelligence protection, his story is partially known. He worked as an agent in place for 15 months while serving in a German military unit. He was extracted under cover capture in May 1944. He was resettled under a new identity in Britain. His family was told he died in captivity in 1946 and mourned him for decades. But the full truth remains locked behind classification barriers that may never be lifted. The documents that will reveal his new identity, his post-war life, his actual death date, what he did during those years, those remain classified. Because Weber's story isn't just about intelligence operations and wartime espionage. It's about the human cost of those operations, about families told their loved ones were dead when they were alive, about identities erased and lives rebuilt in secret, about decisions made in the shadows that shape ordinary lives in ways those families never knew. The hills around Monte Cassino are quiet now, the destroyed monastery rebuilt stone by stone, the battlefield preserved as a memorial to the thousands who died there. Cemeteries hold the bodies of soldiers from many nations who fell during the months of fighting. History records the combat, the casualties, the prisoners taken. But the soldiers who were something else, who fought while betraying, who were captured while being extracted, whose families mourned while they lived under new names in new countries, those stories remain sealed behind classifications that have outlived everyone who made the original decisions. They hid Hans Weber's past since World War II. The truth finally surfaced after 81 years. But not all of it. Not his new name. Not where he lived or when he died, or what he did with the life his family never knew he had. Just that he survived, and that survival required his family to believe he was dead, to grieve for him, to move forward without ever knowing the truth. The files remain classified. The family remains uninformed. And maybe that silence itself is the answer, that some truths about what intelligence services do, about what they ask people to sacrifice, about what they decide families don't need to know, are never meant to be fully revealed. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.